Welcome to Type C Tech Reviews. Today we're going to be doing a review of the Hisense U7K. If at any point during the video you want to check out this exact same TV, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. But let's jump into the review. All right, firstly, this comes in 55, 65, 75, and 85-inch TV variants. I think there also might be a larger variant, but that's not common. The panel type on this is a mini LED lit VA panel with a quantum dot layer, which is what Hisense calls ULED. Now, if you don't know, mini LEDs allow this to have a full array local dimming, which essentially means parts of the screen will get darker and parts of them will get brighter to increase the contrast ratio, to give you more deep inky blacks and just have a beautiful image overall. And then the quantum dot layer just widens the color gamuts, gives you more vibrant, deep, beautiful colors. These all sound like great things. Now let's talk about the OS. This is using Google TV. It's personally, and you guys have probably heard me say this a lot lately if you follow me, but I absolutely love Google TV. It's currently my favorite OS on any TV. It's very modern looking. It's been updated fairly recently to just have better graphics. On this TV with the Google TV, there is a little bit of a lag, but only when you first boot this up after it's been sitting on standby for over 24 hours. So if you only use your TV every 2 days, for the first 10, 15, 20 seconds, you'll have a little bit of lag and then it'll be super, super smooth. I didn't have any lag issues after the TV is actually on and warmed up slightly, and it worked quite well. So this does feel like a premium TV in terms of the speed of the OS. Now, let's talk about the remote here. The remote itself has a great feel to the rubberized buttons. They're very clicky, they're very satisfying, and they feel high quality. The remote doesn't feel as premium as others in this class, but functionally it's great, and I really have no complaints there. There's no metal on this, and it does feel fairly light, so in that regard, this does feel a little bit cheaper, but the buttons themselves do feel nice, so I'm gonna give it a pass. Now, one more thing to mention with the OS is this does have screen mirroring, so if you do screen mirroring a lot, I know that I personally use screen mirroring a lot for looking at like Zillow and houses, but this can not only do it with Androids, but it actually has Apple AirPlay as well. So if you have an iPhone or a Mac or whatever, this works great with that. All right, but let's get more into the TV itself. Let's talk brightness. In SDR, this is great. This is hitting up to 700 nits, but the real screen, like full screen brightness, is between 500 and 600 nits, which is still very, very good. This means it's gonna keep reflections away. If you're in a bright room or if your TV is in a bright room, this is still going to be a viable option for that, where some TVs just are not options at all as they are just too dim. Now, brightness in HDR is also fantastic, going all the way up to 1000 nits. That's really its claimed 1000 nits, and it genuinely does hit that in those peak highlights and even in larger windows. Pretty impressive here. Now, most of the time, you're probably actually gonna be looking at 650 nits, but still very, very good for HDR. The overall experience here was pretty impressive. It also has the color gamut to support and back up the HDR here. Overall, this makes a very vibrant and beautiful picture. In terms of brightness, this is very similar to the TCL Q7, which I very recently reviewed. Also, in the exact same price point, I will be comparing those two TVs together quite a bit in this review. Now, local dimming is where it gets very interesting here. Firstly, with local dimming set to anything but high, it really doesn't do much at all. So just set this in high and leave it. But a few things are going on here. Firstly, in the 65-inch variant, which is the one that I bought for this review, this has 384 local dimming zones, which is actually pretty good at this price point. When compared to the TCL Q7, the 65-inch only had 160 zones. So this has about double, or actually substantially more than double the TCL Q7. And the differences between the Q7 and this TV get even larger when you go to the larger sized TVs, as the TCL Q7 with the 75 and 85-inch variant max out at 200 local dimming zones, which for that screen size is not really that much, whereas this TV at the 75 and 85-inch variants max out well over 1,000 local dimming zones. So the difference in the bigger TVs is much more apparent. So you might be thinking, well, across the board, the Hisense is better in this regard, but that's actually not the case. With local dimming on both TVs, this contrast ratio is about 45,000 to 1, which is still very good. They have nice, deep blacks, but the TCL Q7's contrast ratio is substantially better at over 80,000 to 1. So the blacks, the deep inky blacks on the Q7 are substantially better than the Hisense. Now, the Hisense is still very, very good, and it has significantly better local dimming. So the local dimming works much better than the Q7, but the Q7's contrast ratio overall is just better, and you can't get away from that. So they both do things extremely well, and I would say if you're gonna buy one, if you're going for the 85 or 75-inch TVs, that's where you might wanna go with the Hisense because of the far more local dimming zones. But it really does come up to personal preference. I personally also have the 75-inch Q7, and I absolutely love that. Now, to finish this section off, local dimming by size for this Hisense, there's 240 zones for the 55-inch, 384 zones for the 65-inch, 512 zones for the 75-inch, and 1,296 zones for the 85-inch. That's where the 85-inch is really, really gonna shine. So if you are gonna get the 85 and you're choosing between the Q7 and the Hisense does have a massive proposition there with that massive amount of local dimming zones for this price point. Now let's move on to colors. Colors are great as expected here. Firstly, this uses FRC or frame rate control to output 10 bits of color from a natively 8-bit panel, as well as that quantum dot layer that increases that color coverage, which is great, covering the Rec 2020 color gamut. But the biggest thing here is the accuracy. While this does have a wide color gamut, great for HDR content, the color accuracy out of the box is very, very good. This can be something that is wildly annoying with TVs, as many come out of the box with the most messed up accuracy, where skin tones are off, the greens are way overdone. That's pretty common on TVs, but this one does a very good job. So out of the box, you're not tearing your hair out. All right, now we're gonna move into the gaming section. There's timestamps below if you're just looking at this for being a TV and not to game on it. Now, the refresh rate here bumps this up to 144 Hertz, not just 120. So if you're also gonna be doing some PC gaming, this is great. This also has FreeSync Premium Pro, which means you have HDR on with variable refresh rate at the same time. This is also fully compatible with the PS5, Xbox Series X, and Xbox Series S. And that is all features. You can have variable refresh rate on with HDR, 4K, 120 Hertz. You're not losing anything. You can fully take advantage of all the new consoles. But the biggest thing here, similar to the TCL Q7, is the fantastic input lag that has helped with that ALLM, which is auto low latency mode. It is exceptionally low, just like the Q7. This makes it a fantastic gaming TV, especially if you're gonna be doing PC gaming, which typically you need even lower latency. PC gaming is just awesome on this TV. It's basically like a PC monitor. It's quite good. Now let's move on to ghosting, because this is where the TCL Q7 does slightly better than the Hisense. There is some ghosting, but really mainly with black or darker colors against, again, a darker background. When you're in lighter environments in games, you don't really notice that much ghosting at all. With those darker, deeper colors both together, if you're doing very dark indoor gameplay, you will get some ghosting. It's not absolutely atrocious, but it definitely is present. And there is more ghosting than on the Q7, which was very good. So between the two, if you're doing gaming, the Q7 might be better, whereas the Hisense is gonna be slightly better or substantially better the higher you get in the size. If you're getting those bigger TVs, you're gonna have more local dimming zones. It's gonna be a better picture because of those more local dimming zones. So that is kind of the trade-off there. Now, one last thing I'm gonna mention with the gaming is if you're using this with a PC, this has a sub-pixel layout of blue, green, red. So you may run into some text clarity issues. Now, there are ways to solve this through software. Windows 11, I think, is slightly better, and Mac is also better. So if you are doing that, just something to keep in mind, maybe research before purchasing, ways to fix that, ways to get around it, or it might not bother you at all if you're just gaming with a PC. All right, now let's move on to the integrated speakers. They are okay. They're not terrible, they're not great. The trebles are a little bit muddy. They're not horribly muddy, but they're a little bit muffled. So if you are someone that watches a lot of movies and already has a tough time understanding people's speech, this is not gonna help at all. Now, you should just get a $100 to $150 bookshelf speakers, and it's going to be 1,000 times better than this anyway. And that's true for most TVs. I'll also link one below if you just want some cheap $150 but still very good bookshelf speakers, because these, they don't have a ton of bass. They don't sound bad, but they don't get super loud either. So they're just okay. They're definitely usable, but again, $150 bookshelf speakers are definitely going to like upgrade the experience 1,000 times. All right, but let's move on to ports. Firstly, you have two HDMI 2.1s, one that is eARC, and both of these 2.1s have 4K 144Hz capability. You then have an additional two HDMIs that have a 4K 60Hz capability. You then have two USB Type A's, an optical audio out, a 3.5mm out, a cable port, Ethernet, and a composite in. Pretty much all of the ports that you need, and really cool that you have that 144Hz. That is so nice for PC gamers. Now, standard build quality here is great, as you would expect. Not as good as the Q7, I think, but it is also a little bit lighter. Now, you have two locations that you can put the feet or the stand on, so you can either make it look a little bit wider, or if you have a smaller TV stand, you can go closer in. That is a really, really cool thing. The metal on the edges is painted black, so it doesn't necessarily look as impressive as raw metal. Overall though, it's easy to pick up and move around without any gimmicks to the screen, which is pretty much exactly how I like it. I have a Sony OLED that is actually quite thick. It's probably about that thick, and then the edges of the screen, maybe about 6 inches in, is literally almost paper thin because it's that OLED panel. And it is so stressful to move that TV around, even though it's only like a 45-inch TV. So this, much easier to set up. Now, Vesa compatibility is good here. 55-inch is 400mm by 200mm. 65-inch is 400mm by 300mm. 75-inch is 400mm by 400mm. And 85-inch is 600mm by 400mm. Now we're moving on to the most important section of the entire video, price and value, and should you buy it? Now, its current sale price is sitting at $548, $748, $997, and $1,498, respectively, with 55, 65, 75, and 85-inch variants. Now again, this is the sale price. Check below for current pricing, but I do think this is actually the price of the TV, if that makes sense. Now, both TVs are absolutely fantastic for the money, but if I had to pick one, it's gonna be the TCL Q7, and I'll tell you why. It has slightly better ghosting, and it has deeper blacks, and that's pretty much the main thing. Now, if I was getting the 85-inch, I would probably go for the Hisense because of those almost 1,500 local dimming zones. However, the one thing that I do want to say is we're splitting hairs here. If one TV is on sale more than the other one, I would just pick that one. I wouldn't even think about it. If the Q7 is $1,000 and the Hisense is $800, I'm picking the Hisense 10 out of 10 times. They are so similar that I would just pick whichever one is currently cheaper and on sale. If you're being really specific, the Hisense is probably gonna be better for watching movies, whereas the Q7 is gonna be slightly better for gaming, but they are both extremely good for gaming and they're both extremely good for movies. So really, we are splitting hairs here. Again, if you wanna check it out, there's Amazon links below. I'll link both the Q7 as well as this Hisense, as well as my recommendation for a cheap bookshelf speaker that is of high quality. But yeah, if you want to check out the unboxing and initial impressions of this video, you can check that out right here. But this was Type C Tech Reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next video.